Yes, that's me. Playing a little game called Sonic Freeriders, released for the Xbox 360 in 2010. Now, how did I get into this position, you may be wondering? Well, there's a story behind that.
But first, a word from our sponsors.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Omo-chow. This video was brought to you by Bespoke Post, a free-to-join monthly membership service delivering you top-shelf goods from under-the-radar brands, purchasing 90% of their stock from small businesses, many of which are located right in the United States. Each box has a retail value of around $70 and only costs you $49. Each month, members are introduced to a host of products ranging from outdoor gear, barware, home and kitchen goods, clothing, and more based on a preference quiz that you fill out. Thanks to Bespoke, I finally got a new outdoors watch as a part of the Trek box, something I've wanted for a while. Won't turn you into a superpowered alien, but it does tell time, the next best thing. It also came with an emergency whistle, useful for all those looking to survive in the outdoors. But the best was the Weekender bag, which has a compact and elegant design that's perfect for packing some clothes for a weekend getaway. Definitely my go-to from now on. Before your box ships, you can preview its contents too. You'll get a box assigned to you, and before it's shipped, you'll get a preview of what comes inside and decide if you'd like to 1. Keep it, 2. Swap it for a different box, or 3. Skip the month entirely for no charge. You only pay for what you want. To get 20% off your first box, click the link in the description and enter my code JSR20 at checkout, or go to bespokepost.com/JSR20. That's all uppercase in the checkout code and all lowercase in the URL. Thanks again to Bespoke for sponsoring today's video. And on that note, let's get to the show. We're talking about Sonic Freeriders today, but since it's been almost a year, I say we should go back in time and establish some context first. Sonic Freeriders is the third installment of the Sonic Riders series, which debuted on the PS2, Xbox, GameCube, and PC in 2006, centered on Sonic and friends taking on a group of new rivals in a high-speed hoverboard competition. Sonic Riders is one of my favorite racing games of all time. I wish it had more content, but the fast-paced gameplay and skill ceiling makes it a game that I'm guaranteed to have a good time playing whenever I decide to do so. Especially now that you can play it online with the fan projects. 2 years later, we got Sonic Riders Zero Gravity, which despite what my search engine optimized title would have you believe, I don't think it's a bad game by any means. It still has the aesthetic and vibe I'd expect from a Sonic Riders game, however the complexity of the mechanics was greatly reduced from its predecessor. For example, no longer do players have to do their own tricks in the air and control their landing, pressing the jump button at the right time does all the work for you. It has its own sort of satisfaction, but I think the game leaves a lot to be desired. Zero Gravity was released on the PS2 and the Nintendo Wii, with that being the main version of the game. So while you could thankfully play it with a controller, one of its main focuses was trying to tie into the Wii's motion gimmicks. The Nintendo Wii was the talk of the town back when it was released because of its motion controls, and when something is popular, other companies are going to try and get in on it. For example, Sony released the PlayStation Move for the PlayStation 3 in 2010, which was pretty shameless with how it went about copying the Wii. Although hey, that did lead to a crossover between Sly Cooper, Ratchet & Clank, and Jak and Daxter, 3 of my favorite franchises, but that's a story for another day, I promise. Microsoft also released their own motion-controlled peripheral in 2010 for the Xbox 360, the Xbox Kinect, which I'd say was trying to at least be more original in its shameless effort to grab the Wii audience, as the Kinect was this giant camera that you'd plug into the back of your Xbox 360 that could track the movements of your entire body. However, it didn't really work because while some games were given favorable reviews, many were slammed by critics, and the device itself got some positive reception, but its $150 price tag compared to the $200 Xbox 360 was a pretty tough sell. However, Sega, in their typical fashion, saw a flashy new device and knew Sonic had to be on it. So one of the launch games of the Xbox Kinect was Sonic Freeriders, a game that took the Riders series gameplay and tried to adapt it to this full-bodied motion-controlled gimmick. Like many of the other Kinect games, Sonic Freeriders was slammed by critics for its frustrating, unintuitive, and unresponsive gameplay. Amongst Sonic fans, it's an interesting one because it's definitely one of the most infamous Sonic games of all time. And that's saying something because that's a pretty exhaustive list at this point. I mean, you take one look at people playing the game and the game itself and you can just tell that it's not good or that fun. I'm not speaking in hindsight here either. I'm talking all the way back to when it was announced. The first E3 show I ever saw was 2010, and that was because I had my eyes glued to the coverage for Sonic Colors on both the Wii and DS, Sonic 4 Episode 1, and of course, Sonic Freeriders. But this one just looked off in a way the other games did not. Motion-based games were prone to looking unfinished at E3 demos, and while the game didn't look jank because it was unfinished, it just had problems from its inherent design, like the part where the demo guy is trying to drag the icon into the corner of the screen and he has to do it a few times, or when he tries doing a trick and the game registers a punch by accident. That sort of thing. So the stage was not set for a good game, and when it came out, it was met with the reception you'd expect. Despite all that, I've never played it before today. I'd imagine it being a Kinect exclusive made this a game a lot of fans skipped when they might have tried it otherwise. When I was a kid, I watched the game's cutscenes on YouTube. I watched the trailers and the pre-release footage. I managed to get my hands on all the action figures Jazzwares had done for this game, and I was pretty happy about that because I always thought Sonic Riders would have made for cool figures when I was a kid playing the first two, and then my prayers were answered when this game dropped. But yeah, besides that, I was content with not actually playing it myself. Watching people play it was quite enough. When I first conceptualized this Sonic retrospective, I don't think I ever planned on including it, but you know me, plans change. 21 months ago I figured, why not? I'll get this game off my bucket list and get it on eBay knowing I'd review it one day, and 18 months ago, back when I was working on my Shadow the Hedgehog review, I got a 360 copy of Sonic 06, and a used 360 so I could use it when reviewing Sonic 06 and Sonic Unleashed. That day I also got a Kinect for use in the inevitable Free Riders video, and 18 months later, we finally have gotten to it. In order to even play the game, I had to move my couch to a temporary new spot where it would be out of the way while I played. I then moved my chair and set up my tripod to where the chair used to be. Once the game was on, I was greeted with the Sega logo and said, "Oh, Sega's behind this one. Now I know it's good." And then I was off on Sonic Free Riders. What was it like now that I actually played it myself? Well, it was every bit as dreadful as it looks, and as you have no doubt heard by now. I said earlier that Free Riders was the kind of game where you could tell it didn't look pleasant just by watching footage of it, but playing it is a whole other thing. To start with the obvious, the controls, or lack thereof. To control a character that uses a board, you need to stand to the side, and whichever way you're facing is the direction the character will face, and by doing an about face, the character will switch to the opposite side of the board. To turn, you need to lean your body in whichever direction you need to go. To pick up speed, you need to raise your back leg and kick the air like you were trying to pick up speed in a skateboard. To jump off of ramps, you need to crouch and jump. To get more points, you need to spin to the other side in midair after a jump. On paper, it sounds demanding to have to do all these things in rapid succession, and it is, but in execution, it's a nightmare because the controls barely work in this game. This begins with a lengthy tutorial you can play, and even if it's time consuming, I recommend doing it because you need to get to grips with the basics of this game before even daring to play the campaign. But as early as the tutorial, I noticed that when leaning back, Sonic or whoever I was playing with would fly in that direction, but when leaning forward, they'd barely move unless I was doing a full-on hinge. This really got on my nerves when the final races of Team Heroes and Team Rose's playthroughs require you to do tight corner turns right before the finish line. But there are countless examples of the controls just not working in this game. No better example than the menus. In order to get through the menus, you have to use the force on these icons and drag them to the edge of the screen. Half the time, the game would not detect my hands and I'd get really pissed. They picked the worst possible menu layout for this game they ever could have. A spinning wheel of icons that you rotate through. But while I'm flailing my arms around trying to get the thing to detect my hands, oops, I spun the wheel and now I'm trying to spin it back, but this just spins it forward again and I have to keep spinning until I land on what I wanted. And then drag that icon to where it belonged. But when looking at the actual racing element, on several occasions I would try to kick the air and somehow this would register as me switching sides on the board, which meant that to gain the speed I was trying to, I can either lower my foot that's in the air and try gaining speed with the new back foot because I need to face the opposite direction to be in line with the character, or just hope the game realizes I didn't even switch as it will then rapidly switch me back. You're able to reach out for these ring trails on the edges of lanes, and sometimes the game just would not respond to this as I'm awkwardly bumping into the invisible wall. I'd try to jump off of ramps and the game would not register my jumps and I'd get a C rank and a tiny bit of energy refill. So to jump in this game, you need to do a full body squat before the game even thinks about considering it legit, and even then, sometimes it wouldn't register the jump fast enough so I'd have spent the energy squatting and jumping and nothing came of it. I get that it sounds really stupid to say, but this game is physically demanding to play through, and yes, I played through the entire game from start to finish. While I started off laughing at the game's expense, it quickly stopped being funny as in order to play the game, you need to jump and squat and twist and turn and lean and wipe the screen and reach out and swim in rapid succession. It's genuinely exhausting. Over the 3 days it took me to beat this game, I got 8 hours of exercise in, and 6 of them came from this game. But that's not really a good thing because doing something like heavily leaning backwards while your legs are fully extended or outright leaping into the air and crashing down on the ground over and over and over and over again are just more likely to get you in physical pain than actually grow your muscles or resistance. Like I said, the fact that you'll be doing all of that is exhausting, and then the fact that it's a crapshoot as to whether or not it will work is doubly frustrating. Such as this part in Team Heroes' playthrough where all the controls just stopped working at once.
Why won't he do it? It is not responding! The game isn't responding!
Or this temple level in Team Dark's story. The ceiling will cave in and you have to do yet another full body squat to get through it, and sometimes it just does not work. and I'd be slowed down letting other racers get ahead of me. I was only able to play this game for 2 hours at a time, and that's because after 120 minutes of putting up with these bizarre controls and finicky movement accuracy from the Kinect, your energy is a lot lower than it was when you started, you're sweating bullets, and you just physically cannot play anymore. And if you tried, you'd keep losing because of said fatigue. But that's not even close to the full extent of it. I recommended playing the tutorial earlier, but that doesn't guarantee success. It will just help you with the basics before getting into the game proper. I bring this up again because of the fact that once you're in the game, the rules change frequently. You'd think that the campaign is a series of races like the first 2 Riders games, and you'd be wrong. All 4 campaigns have 10 missions. The first 3 races see your team of choice against another team, like how Team Hero starts off against Team Rose, and then does 3 races against Team Dark, and then 3 races with Team Babylon, and a final, 10th race with Sonic vs. Jet. These 10 races are spread across 3 maps, so you have to play the same track 3 times in a row at minimum, 4 times in the case of the last one. But then, you don't even race other characters for most of the runtime. Instead, you do miscellaneous missions that really try your patience. The first major bottleneck I hit when playing is this Knuckles mission in the ice level. You need to smash a certain number of icicles before crossing the finish line, and I thought this would be simple because in the first 2 games all you had to do was run into Destructibles as a power type character and then you'd hit them automatically. That is not how it works in Free Riders. Instead, you need to punch them yourself. I was so confused and spent 15 minutes on this mission that lasts like 1. That's because none of my punches were registering, and what had me so baffled was that I followed the instructions. The game had a prompt of a guy doing the punching with his right hand, so here I am doing right hook after right hook looking like a jackass, and it barely worked. So when I got to a similar mission as Storm in Team Babylon's story, I was terrified. But then, I learned that what this icon means is that you can only punch with your front hand, and whichever one that is correlated to whatever side of the board you're on. You also don't have to do a full-on hook, just a straightforward jab, and this had me utterly stunned.
Oh, sir, wait, what? It only works if you do it on the opposite side!
The whole switching sides mechanic was just so frustrating. Like previous games, different types have different shortcuts. Speed type characters grinding on rails, fly type characters going through these rings in the sky, and power type characters bashing through things. The problem is that Sonic, for example, can only grind when the player is facing right. But Jet, on the other hand, can only do it the opposite way. The game is already expecting so much of you at breakneck speed, but then you'll be Jet, see a grinding shortcut, and then you miss out on it because you didn't think to switch sides in order to get on the stupid thing. There were so many missions that pissed me off here. Like this one as Cream, where if your board runs out of energy, the mission ends. But the jumps I was doing weren't registering, so I kept failing over and over because I didn't have enough energy in my board to last. Or this mission with E10000B in Team Dark story where you have to target enemies with a missile power-up. Half the time, it wouldn't register my throws. Sometimes the missile would just hit the walls and not my targets, and then I'd run out of time. I kept trying to make precise shots, but then I gave up and started spamming the toss motion the second I got the missiles and won in like 10 seconds. What great and balanced difficulty. Side note, the power-ups in this game were also a headache and a half. The worst offender being this ball you have to toss where 9 times out of 10, you will hit yourself with the attack. And that literally happened to the guy at the E3 demo.
Bowling ball item. Hit myself with my own bowling ball there.
I mean, did no one think that was a terrible idea? Even making it possible to hit yourself with your own attack? But as I was saying, this game changes up the rules all the time. Like how you'll randomly be on a minecart and the controls are entirely different from the board, or landing in the water and riding a dolphin, but if you get back on land and then back in the water, you just die. Mother of all examples being the first mission with Vector and Team Rose. He rides a motorcycle and not a hoverboard, so the controls are completely changed, as you must place your hands in the air as if you were holding a bar. This mission requires you to maintain a certain speed for its entire duration. I'd get past the gate, go fast, and then I'd lean to turn only to have Vector completely stop and I'd fail the mission. I had no idea why this was happening, so I walked over to my game box to consult the manual. Despite having to lean while using a board, on a bike, where those rules would still make sense, leaning causes you to stop dead in your tracks. To turn on a bike, you must raise your left arm straight in the air and lower your right arm straight down to turn left, and vice versa to turn right. What an idiot I am for my inability to intuit that. This game is truly awful, and that goes for every aspect of it. Visually, its textures and models look low-res, the anti-aliasing is poor with rampant screen tearing from start to finish. The game just looks more basic than Sonic 06, a game released 4 years earlier at this point which already didn't look great by early 360 standards. The music is good in this game, especially Free, the main theme, which has always been an earworm of mine whenever I hear it, but that's about the only nice thing I can say about the game. The weak production values carry over to the story as it's a wholesale downgrade from the previous games. You know, the ones on PS2 and Wii. I loved the cutscenes of Sonic Riders 1. It saw the cast being more expressive and cartoony than they usually are, and it was a lot of fun to watch. I criticized the story presentation in Zero Gravity as none of that charm was in the sequel. Instead, its characters mostly stood around talking, a trope I really don't like as has been discussed numerous times before. But that's eons better than Free Riders, where we get cutscenes that look like the ones from Sonic Rush on DS. A bunch of character PNGs that they switch through with voice acting on top of it. To give it some more life, they add this blue filter over it to make it look like a TV, and it's just so bad and low budget. But these cutscenes became my lifeline while playing, as it served as my only relief from the terrible gameplay. I also laughed several times because this was the first game to feature the 2010s voice cast, and Shadow, as I'm sure you know, was reinterpreted in the 2010s to be an utter asshole and just cracked me up with his Dracula voice.
Pageantry aside, we're here to win. You can be sure of that.
I'm impressed, Shadow. You guys managed to beat Jet and his gang.
Did you really think that we would lose? We were just waiting for your circus performance to end. We're ready.
Although to be fair to Shadow, most of the characters are really annoying and cynical in this game, so I can't fault him specifically. For once. The story was absolute hoopla in this game, but that also entertained me quite a bit. What happens is that Eggman, under his new fake name, King Doc, opens the new X-World Grand Prix so Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles join, the Babylon Rogues join, Amy and Cream enlist the help of a money-hungry Vector to play, because this was back when Big was hated and not a meme, so he was borderline banned from the series, and then Shadow and Rouge, who obviously have no friends or regard for anyone but themselves, just drag some random blue robot that barely functions off the street to be their third member. Surprise, surprise, this was another scheme of Eggman's, but the blue robot that Shadow and Rouge dragged in by complete random chance was actually Metal Sonic in disguise! Collecting data on the heroes while they raced so Eggman could be the best racer. And I got a laugh out of how Eggman was the most surprised by the Metal Sonic reveal. As Sonic aptly says,
Wait, how did Eggman not know it was him already?
but it turns out, oh no, Metal Sonic sent Eggman fake data so he'd fail, and then he could race Sonic, and then that fails, and everyone laughs at how stupid this plan was.
Yeesh, my job would be easier if you shot down your own plots like this more often.
But at least they had fun. I mean, what the hell kind of story is that? It's just random nonsense for the whole runtime. The 4 campaigns don't even play off each other like they do in SA1, 2, Heroes, 06, and the first 2 Riders games. Each campaign is like its own universe where that team wins the whole thing, followed by a completely unnecessary last story mode. Now, that's another thing with this game, it goes on forever. In the first 2 games, both campaigns had 6 races and then a final boss with Sonic at the end of the second campaign. Free Riders has 4 campaigns with 10 missions each and then a last story with 3 races on the same track that goes on for like 6 minutes. I did not care. I pushed through all the physical pain this game put me through and powered my way to the end. I was cracking jokes when I started playing the game, but by the end, I was dead silent as I knew the end was in sight and I just had to keep putting up with the game for a little longer so I could say I fully completed the story mode of Sonic fucking Free Riders. And I did it. And when the game ended, I could only conclude the obvious. This is one of the worst games I have ever played in my life. You know what? Forget the modesty, Sonic Free Riders is the worst game I have ever played in my life. Think about it. What do basically all video games have in common? From the Pac-Mans and Galagas of the world all the way to DMC5 and Breath of the Wild. Some kind of skill mastery of the challenges put in front of you as the game escalates in difficulty. Whether that challenge be timing, reaction time, dexterity, deductive skills, or puzzle solving. I've never seen a game fail at this so consistently quite like Sonic Free Riders. Seriously. It's a game where the mechanics barely work. It's a crapshoot if your inputs will be recognized at all, in addition to them not being that fun anyway. Because the game is liable to leave you physically in pain and dripping with sweat, desperately in need of a shower, like me after finishing it.
Dude, that was the worst game I've ever played in my life. I mean, it defies comprehension, it's so bad, so let's just cut to the voiceover and have that be the end of that.
We're dealing with a game that is frustrating beyond belief simply because of how bad the controls are and how unreliable the motion element of it is. When doing the most basic moves in a game is anyone's guess as to whether or not it's going to work, that game is not looking at a good review. No way in hell. This is a new low for my channel. I've never played a game as poorly communicated, as obnoxious, or as sub-functioning as Sonic Free Riders, and I have certainly never walked away from a game feeling physically unwell. I don't score things I review, I don't think it's necessary, but if you were curious, I look at all these games in various tiers, ranging from S tier at the top, and then A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier, and E tier at the bottom. To quickly explain, an S tier game is where I'd put games I could play until the moon turns blue. Any problem I could bring up is purely a nitpick because the game is just so good. An A tier game is great, just with a couple things here and there I might take issue with that keeps it from being an all-time favorite. A B tier game is just a good game. It's not perfect, not something I'd want to play every day, but it's good. Definitely something you'd come back to without hesitation if you had to or just simply felt like it. A C tier game is one that I think is largely okay, but is nothing special and not really worth coming back to often, but it can be played and enjoyment can be had either because of the good elements it does have or because its flaws aren't major enough to make it a bad game. A D tier game is either a game that is very much unfinished but I do enjoy playing, or a game that I think is technically finished but is not something I enjoyed at all. We saw this a few weeks ago when I reviewed Resident Evil Code Veronica, a game I had a lot of issues with but was still plenty playable, I just didn't enjoy the experience. Lastly, you have an E tier game. This is one that I think is just a straight up terrible game. A game that is either soul-suckingly boring or bafflingly bad or frustrating. Now, thanks to free riders, I have a new tier on the scale. The F tier. This is reserved for the lowest of the low. Games that are so ass-tastic that they barely even count. The Big Riggs, the Superman 64s of the world. So bad that it is borderline unplayable. I've never reviewed an F tier game before today, so it was quite the experience doing so, especially since it was one that was so physically demanding. Initially, I was going to say that at least Free Riders doesn't come with any stakes, like the series wasn't depending on this stupid racing game being good, but then again, the sad fact is, this game did do one thing. It killed the Sonic Riders series. I love the first Sonic Riders. It's such a cool and unique take on the mascot platformer turned racing game with its futuristic vibe and badass tricks. It's so much fun. Zero Gravity might not be great by comparison, but it was at least functioning. Free Riders was so bad that we just never got another Riders game when the idea had so much potential. 2010 also saw the release of Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, a much more standard kart racer, and that game got 2 sequels in the years that followed, while Sonic Riders got left in the dust, over this stupid, gimmicky Kinect game. And that much I'll always hold against this piece of shit. But with that said, we're caught up on the spin-offs, meaning the next Sonic video will be on Sonic Lost World. So look forward to that when I get to it in September. That may come as a disappointment for those who want it now, but bear with me here. I just thought it would be fun to knock out these 3 games around the 10th anniversary of Sonic 4 Episode 2, which we covered last week. When we get back to Sonic, my plan is to cover all the remaining games that I intend to cover, right before the release of Sonic Frontiers, as I'll review that and make some other bonus Sonic videos before the year is over. But until then, I'll just say what I always do. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.